There is a moment in every person's life when the usual explanations stop working, when therapy has given you tools but not answers, when religion has given you comfort but not clarity, when self-help has given you strategies but not the deeper truth you are actually searching for. If you are here, you have probably already lived that moment. You have probably already sensed that there is something beneath the surface of your life, some invisible architecture shaping your experiences, your relationships, your struggles, and your fate in ways that no ordinary framework has ever fully explained. What you are about to discover is not a new idea. It is one of the oldest and most carefully preserved bodies of wisdom in human history. The ancient Vedic tradition called it Akasha, a Sanskrit word meaning ether, the fifth and most fundamental element of existence. Not simply empty space, but a living, intelligent medium, the invisible substance through which all of creation moves, breathes, and remembers. The ancient Egyptians referenced it as the collective memory of the gods. The Christian mystics pointed to it as the book of life. And in the modern era, figures like Helena Blavatsky and the extraordinary psychic Edgar Cayce brought it into Western consciousness under the name we now recognize, the Akashic Records. But here's what most people who encounter the Akashic Records never fully grasp. The records are not simply a spiritual filing cabinet. They are not a passive archive you visit to peek at your past lives or confirm your soul's purpose. The Akashic Records are governed by a precise and powerful set of cosmic laws, living, intelligent principles that determine how energy moves through your soul's journey, why certain experiences keep finding you, why certain wounds refuse to heal, why certain relationships carry a weight that feels ancient and unfinished, and most importantly, how you can begin to consciously align with the deepest currents of your own destiny. You do not need to be a mystic to understand these laws. You do not need years of spiritual training or any special gift. What you need is exactly what you already have, a willingness to look deeper, to question the surface of things, and to consider that the universe has always been far more ordered, far more intelligent, and far more intimate with your life than you were ever taught to believe. We begin where everything begins, with vibration. At the subatomic level, every particle of matter in the known universe is in a constant state of motion, oscillating, pulsing, trembling with energy. Your body vibrates, your thoughts vibrate, your emotions vibrate. The words you speak into the air carry a frequency. The beliefs you hold silently in the back of your mind carry a frequency. And all of these frequencies are constantly interacting with the frequencies of everything else in existence. Modern quantum physics arrived at this understanding in the 20th century, but the ancient sages arrived there thousands of years earlier. The Vedic tradition identified Akasha as the primordial element from which all other elements were born, not simply empty space, but a cosmic ocean, alive and responsive, through which every thought, every emotion, every action leaves a permanent impression. Think of what happens when a stone is dropped into still water. Ripples radiate outward in every direction. They do not simply vanish. They travel until they meet a shoreline, another wave, or an obstacle that transforms them into a new pattern of energy. The Akashic field operates on precisely this principle, but on an infinite, multi-dimensional scale. Every thought you have ever had, every emotion you have ever felt, every choice you have ever made, each one is a stone dropped into the cosmic ocean of Akasha, creating ripples that are recorded permanently in the field. This is not a poetic metaphor. This is the operating principle of the universe itself. Everything that exists in the physical world first exists as a vibration in the Akashic field. Before the word, there was the frequency. Before the event,
There was the energetic pattern that called it forward. And here's what makes this deeply personal. Every soul carries a unique vibrational signature. Much like a fingerprint, no two are identical. This signature is not fixed. It is dynamic, shaped continuously by your choices, your experiences, your beliefs, and the degree to which you are living in alignment or out of alignment with your soul's deepest truth. But it is always present, always broadcasting, and always in conversation with the field that surrounds and permeates every moment of your life. This is why the Akashic records remember everything, because vibration never truly disappears. It transforms, it shifts in form, it dissipates in intensity, but it leaves a permanent impression in the medium through which it traveled. Nothing is ever truly forgotten in the universe. Every experience, every moment of love or grief, every act of courage or betrayal, all of it leaves a vibrational imprint in the Akashic field. Edgar Cayce, perhaps the most documented Akashic reader of the modern era, described the records as an impression made upon the skein of time and space, a vibrational memory woven into the very fabric of existence. During thousands of documented readings, he consistently accessed information about individuals' past lives, health conditions, and soul patterns with a precision that baffled medical professionals and researchers alike. His explanation was always the same. He was simply reading what was already written in the field. Understanding this law changes the way you see manifestation entirely. Many modern teachings on the law of attraction focus almost exclusively on thought, on visualizing what you want, affirming what you desire, thinking positively and expecting results. And while thought is indeed a form of vibration, it is only one layer of a far more complex energetic reality. The Akashic tradition teaches that manifestation occurs at the level of soul vibration, not merely mental vibration. What you consistently experience in your life is not simply a reflection of what you think. It is a reflection of what you are vibrating at the deepest levels of your being. Your unresolved emotional wounds carry a vibration. Your unconscious beliefs carry a vibration. The soul contracts you entered before this lifetime carry a vibration. And all of these layers are broadcasting simultaneously into the Akashic field, drawing toward you the experiences, people, and circumstances that resonate at matching frequencies. This is not a system of punishment. It is a system of perfect precision. The ancient law does not judge your vibration as good or bad. It simply responds to it, the way a mirror responds to whatever stands before it, without preference, without opinion, without exception. And the moment you stop asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" and begin asking, "What frequency am I broadcasting that keeps calling this forward?" everything in your life begins to shift. The Akashic tradition is consistent across every culture that has preserved these teachings. Evolution is the movement from lower vibration to higher vibration. Fear vibrates lower than love. Shame vibrates lower than joy. Ignorance vibrates lower than wisdom. And the soul's entire journey across lifetimes, as recorded in the Akashic field, is a story of gradual, sometimes painful, always purposeful movement up the vibrational scale. This does not mean that difficult experiences have no value. On the contrary, the ancient laws teach that the densest, most challenging experiences are often the most powerful catalysts for vibrational growth. The soul does not evolve in comfort alone. It evolves through contrast, through challenge, through the friction that forces it to choose again and again whether to contract in fear or expand in awareness. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, truth over comfort, love over resentment, you are not simply making a better decision. You are rewriting your vibrational signature in the Akashic field. You are changing the frequency of your broadcast and therefore changing what the universe mirrors back to you. Perhaps the most humbling truth embedded in this law is this: The Akashic field is not a distant archive you must journey to reach. It is the very medium in which you exist right now. You are not outside of it looking in. You are inside of it, always, in every moment, broadcasting and being responded to with absolute consistency. You have always been in conversation with the universe. The only question is whether that conversation has been conscious or unconscious, deliberate or accidental. The Akashic laws exist to make it conscious. And in the next part of this journey, we turn to one of the most widely misunderstood of all cosmic principles, a law that most people fear, few truly understand, and that the Akashic records reveal in its fullest and most liberating truth: the law of cause and effect.
No word in the spiritual lexicon has been more widely used and more deeply misunderstood than karma. In modern popular culture, karma has been reduced to a kind of cosmic scoreboard, a celestial punishment system where bad people eventually get what they deserve and good people are rewarded for their virtue. It has become a word spoken with quiet satisfaction when someone who wronged you finally faces consequences. It has become a hashtag, a bumper sticker, a caption beneath a revenge story. This is not karma, not even close. The original Sanskrit term, karma, simply means action, nothing more, nothing less. It does not inherently imply punishment or reward. It does not carry the weight of moral judgment. At its most fundamental level, karma is the law of cause and effect, the cosmic principle that every action generates a corresponding consequence, and that no action at any level of existence occurs in isolation. In the Akashic tradition, this law is not a system of divine justice administered by an external judge. It is a property of the universe itself, as impersonal and as precise as the law of gravity. Drop an object, and it falls. Generate an action, and it produces an effect. The field does not decide whether you deserve the consequence. The field simply records the cause and reflects the effect, always without exception. Here is where the Akashic records become essential to understanding karma in its fullest depth, because karma does not only operate within a single lifetime. This is perhaps the most critical and most overlooked dimension of the law of cause and effect, and it is the dimension that explains so much of what appears inexplicable in human experience. Why are some souls born into circumstances of profound suffering with no apparent cause rooted in their current lifetime? Why do certain people carry inexplicable fears, gifts, or compulsions that have no traceable origin in their present experience? Why do some relationships carry an intensity of love, of conflict, of recognition that feels far older and far deeper than the years you have known each other? The Akashic records provide the answer that a single lifetime framework simply cannot. Every cause a soul has ever generated, across every lifetime it has ever lived, is recorded in the Akashic field, and the effects of those causes do not expire at the moment of physical death. They carry forward, encoded in the soul's vibrational signature, into the next chapter of its journey. This is the true architecture of karma, not a punishment system, not a reward program, but a living record of energetic consequences that the soul carries with it across the full arc of its evolution, working through, resolving, and transcending each cause it is set in motion until balance is restored. The Akashic tradition identifies karma operating across three distinct layers, each more subtle and more far-reaching than the last. The first is what the Vedic teachings call sanchita karma. This is the accumulated karma of all past lifetimes, the complete archive of every cause your soul has ever generated across its entire history of incarnations. Most of this karma remains dormant in any given lifetime, but it forms the deeper backdrop of your soul's journey and the overall trajectory of your spiritual evolution. It is the full library, the complete record, the total weight of everything your soul has ever set in motion across every existence it has ever lived. The second layer is prarabdha karma, the portion of accumulated karma that has been activated for resolution in your current lifetime.
Think of it as the specific chapter your soul chose to work through in this particular incarnation. Not all of your karmic history is in play at once. The soul, in consultation with its higher guidance and the intelligence of the Akashic field, selects specific threads to resolve in each lifetime. This is why certain themes feel so insistent in your life, why certain challenges keep returning, regardless of how hard you work to escape them, why certain relationship dynamics feel so deeply woven into the fabric of who you are. These are not random. These are the fingerprints of prarabdha karma, the specific causes your soul arrived here to meet, transform, and move beyond. The third layer is agami karma, the new karma being generated by the choices you make in this present moment. Every decision, every intention, every action you take right now is adding new entries to your Akashic record. This is the layer over which you have the most immediate conscious influence, and it is where the law of free will intersects most directly with the law of cause and effect. What you choose today is not just shaping your tomorrow, it is shaping the vibrational signature your soul will carry into lifetimes you have not yet lived. Understanding these three layers transforms the entire experience of difficulty. The persistent pattern that has followed you through multiple relationships is not a character flaw. The inexplicable fear that has no origin you can find in your childhood is not irrational. The strange sense of unfinished business you carry in certain areas of your life is not your imagination. These are messages from the Akashic field, precise, compassionate communications from the deepest layers of your own soul's history, pointing you towards exactly what needs to be seen, felt, and resolved. This distinction is not merely philosophical, it is transformational. When karma is understood as punishment, the natural human response is shame, resentment, and resignation. If your suffering is the universe punishing you for something you did, perhaps in a past life you cannot even consciously remember, then you are a victim of a system you cannot control, being held accountable for actions you have no access to. This interpretation is not only psychologically devastating, it is also cosmologically inaccurate. The Akashic tradition is unanimous on this point. The soul does not incarnate to be punished. It incarnates to learn, to grow, and to evolve. The law of cause and effect is not the universe's instrument of retribution. It is the universe's instrument of education. Consider how mastery is developed in any domain of human skill. A musician does not become a master by being punished for playing a wrong note. They become a master by playing the wrong note, hearing the dissonance, understanding what produced it, and adjusting. The consequence of the wrong note is not a penalty, it is information, precise, immediate, honest feedback from the instrument itself, responding to exactly what was given to it. The Akashic field operates identically. Every karmic consequence is information. It is the universe speaking back to the soul in the language of lived experience, saying this is what that frequency produces, this is what that choice generates, this is the effect of that cause. Not to condemn the soul, but to educate it, to give it the lived, embodied understanding it needs to make a different choice, generate a different cause, and move forward in its evolution. This reframing changes everything about how you relate to the difficult chapters of your life. The betrayal that broke you open, the failure that dismantled an identity you had built, the loss that forced you to find a deeper ground beneath your feet. None of these were the universe punishing you. All of them were the universe teaching you, precisely, personally, and with a depth of intelligence that only becomes visible when you stop resisting the lesson and begin asking what this experience is trying to show you. When trained Akashic readers access the records in relation to karma, what they consistently describe is not a ledger of sins and punishments. What they describe is something far more nuanced and far more compassionate, a detailed map of the soul's journey, showing where energy was generated, where it became blocked, where contracts were formed between souls who agreed to play specific roles in each other's evolution, and where the path forward lies waiting to be consciously chosen. The records do not show you your karma to condemn you. They show it to you so that you can finally understand the pattern well enough to transcend it. because that is the ultimate purpose of the law of cause and effect, as the Akashic tradition has always taught it, not to trap the soul in an endless cycle of consequence, but to educate it so thoroughly, so deeply, so completely, that it eventually generates causes rooted not in fear, wound, or unconsciousness, but in wisdom, love, and clear, deliberate awareness. That is the moment when karma begins to dissolve, not because the law ceases to operate, but because the soul has finally learned to generate causes that produce only what it truly desires to experience. And the Akashic field, which has recorded every step of that long journey, bears witness to the transformation with the same perfect neutrality with which it recorded every stumble along the way. The field does not celebrate your growth any more than it condemned your struggles. It simply reflects, always and without exception, exactly what you are. And as what you are continues to evolve, the reflection changes with it. This is the law of cause and effect in its fullest, most liberating truth, not a chain around the soul's ankle, but the very mechanism by which the soul learns to walk in freedom.
There is a concept that most spiritual traditions have circled around without ever fully explaining. A principle so fundamental to the soul's journey that without understanding it, the entire framework of karma, vibration, and cosmic law remains incomplete. It is the principle of soul contracts, and when viewed through the lens of the Akashic records, it reveals something that changes the way you see every significant relationship, every pivotal encounter, and every chapter of your life that felt too perfectly timed, too deeply painful, or too strangely meaningful to be accidental. Before you were born into this lifetime, your soul did not simply arrive here by chance. The Akashic tradition teaches that prior to incarnation, the soul enters a state of profound awareness in which it reviews the vibrational record of its accumulated journey. It sees the karmic threads that remain unresolved. It identifies the lessons that are ready to be learned. And in that state of expanded clarity, it makes agreements. Not arbitrary agreements, but precise, intentional contracts with other souls who are also preparing to incarnate. Souls who have their own karmic threads to resolve, their own lessons to encounter, their own evolution to continue. These are soul contracts, and they are written into the Akashic field before the first breath of a new lifetime is ever taken. This is why certain people enter your life with an impact that feels entirely disproportionate to the time you have known them. A stranger you meet for one afternoon who says something that redirects the entire course of your life. A relationship that burns with an intensity that neither logic nor circumstance can fully explain. A parent, a child, a teacher, a rival, whose presence in your story feels less like coincidence and more like something that was always going to happen. Because according to the Akashic tradition, it was. Not in the sense that your life is a rigid script with no room for choice, but in the sense that certain souls agreed, at a level deeper than conscious memory, to find each other, to show up for each other, to serve as mirrors, teachers, catalysts, and companions in the specific chapters of growth that each soul came here to live through. The Akashic records contain the complete record of every soul contract ever made, every agreement, every role, every chosen dynamic between souls who agreed to play specific parts in each other's evolution. And what trained readers of the records consistently report is that these contracts are extraordinarily purposeful. They are not random. They are not accidental. They are designed with a precision that reflects the deepest intelligence of the soul itself, knowing exactly what experiences it needs in order to grow, and choosing exactly the right souls to provide those experiences. This understanding transforms the way you interpret the most painful relationships of your life. The person who betrayed you at your most vulnerable moment, the parent who withheld the love you needed most, the partner who dismantled something in you before you were ready to rebuild. The Akashic tradition does not ask you to excuse those actions or to pretend that the pain they caused was not real. The pain was real. The impact was real.
but the tradition does offer a perspective that goes deeper than blame and deeper than victimhood. It asks you to consider that the soul who hurt you may have been fulfilling an agreement made before either of you arrived here. An agreement to provide exactly the kind of friction, the kind of wound, the kind of breaking open that your soul needed in order to access a depth it could not have reached any other way. This is one of the most challenging teachings in the entire Akashic tradition, because it requires the human mind to hold two truths simultaneously: that the pain was real and valid, and that it may have also been purposeful and agreed upon at a soul level. These two truths do not cancel each other out, they deepen each other, and sitting with both of them without collapsing into pure victimhood or forced spiritual bypassing is itself one of the most advanced forms of growth the soul can undertake in a human lifetime. Not all soul contracts are painful. Many of the most beautiful and sustaining relationships in your life also carry the signature of pre-incarnational agreement. The friend who appeared at exactly the right moment, the mentor whose words landed in you like seeds that grew for decades, the partner whose presence taught you what it feels like to be truly seen. These connections carry the same quality of inevitability, the same sense that something larger than circumstance arranged them, because something did. The intelligence of the Akashic field, working in alignment with the soul's own deepest intentions, orchestrating the encounters that serve the evolution each soul came here to achieve. There is another dimension of soul contracts that the Akashic tradition addresses with particular care: the contracts that have been completed but not yet released. Because not every contract that was purposeful at one stage of the soul's journey remains purposeful indefinitely. Some contracts were made for a specific lesson, and once that lesson has been fully learned, once the growth that the contract was designed to catalyze has actually occurred, the contract itself is complete. It has served its purpose, and the soul is free to release it and move forward. But here is where many souls become stuck. The completion of a soul contract does not always feel like completion. It often feels like loss, like ending, like grief. The relationship that carried you through a decade of growth may need to transform or dissolve precisely because the work it was designed for is finished. The dynamic that once felt essential to your identity may need to be released precisely because you have grown beyond the version of yourself that required it. And the soul that does not understand soul contracts will often cling to what is complete, mistaking the grief of an ending for evidence that something went wrong, when in truth, something went exactly right. The Akashic records offer a way of reading these completions clearly. When a reader accesses the records in relation to a specific relationship or dynamic, what they are often looking for is whether the contract between two souls is still active, still serving its intended purpose, or whether it has reached its natural completion and is ready to be consciously released. This kind of clarity does not make the grief smaller, but it makes it navigable. It transforms loss from something senseless into something sacred, from a wound into a graduation. There is also what the Akashic tradition calls karmic loops, patterns that repeat not because the soul has failed, but because the contract has not yet been fully honored, not because the lesson has been refused, but because it has not yet been fully received. A karmic loop is the Akashic field's way of returning the soul to the essential curriculum from a different angle, with a different cast of characters, until the growth that was always the point finally takes root and becomes permanent. You have likely felt a karmic loop in your own life, the same kind of relationship dynamic appearing in different people, the same financial pattern recreating itself regardless of external circumstances, the same emotional wound being activated by completely different triggers across completely different chapters of your life. This is not punishment. This is the soul's own intelligence working through the Akashic field, ensuring that no essential lesson is bypassed, that no contract made in wisdom before this lifetime is abandoned simply because one expression of it became too uncomfortable to sit with. The way out of a karmic loop is never avoidance. It is never simply removing yourself from the triggering person or circumstance and hoping the pattern doesn't follow you, because it will. The Akashic field is not confused about where you go. The way out of a karmic loop is completion. It is turning toward the lesson rather than away from it, asking not how do I escape this, but what is this showing me that I have not yet been willing to fully see? What is this experience asking me to understand, to feel, to integrate, to finally and permanently release? When that answer is honestly answered, and the answer is embodied rather than merely understood intellectually, the loop closes, the contract is honored, and the Akashic record of that particular thread of unresolved energy shifts, not erased because the field records everything, but resolved, completed, transformed from an open loop of recurring experience into a closed chapter of soul wisdom that now becomes part of the vibrational foundation from which the next level of the journey is built.
Of all the laws recorded in the Akashic field, none has been more debated, more misunderstood, and more desperately needed than the law of divine timing, because timing is the one dimension of human experience that the rational mind finds most difficult to accept. We live in a culture that celebrates speed, that equates urgency with importance and delay with failure, that has conditioned us to interpret waiting as a sign that something has gone wrong, that we are not doing enough, not trying hard enough, not worthy enough of the thing we are reaching toward. And so, when life does not move at the pace we demand of it, when the door we are knocking on refuses to open, when the breakthrough we have worked toward continues to sit just beyond our reach, we do not ask what the timing might be teaching us. We ask what is wrong with us. The Akashic tradition offers a fundamentally different framework, one that does not ask you to abandon your ambition or surrender your desire, but one that asks you to consider that the universe operates on a timing that is not arbitrary, not cruel, and not indifferent to your longing. It is precise, it is intelligent, and it is always, without exception, in service of the soul's highest evolution rather than the ego's most immediate comfort. Divine timing, as recorded in the Akashic field, is the principle that every experience, every encounter, every breakthrough, and every dissolution in a soul's journey has an optimal moment of arrival. Not the moment the personality wants it, not the moment the mind has decided would be most convenient, but the moment at which the soul has completed the internal preparation necessary to receive what is coming without being destroyed by it, without distorting it, and without immediately recreating the vibrational conditions that would cause it to collapse. This distinction is everything, because what most people are actually asking for when they demand that something happen now is not the thing itself. It is their current idea of the thing, their current capacity to hold the thing. And the universe, reading the Akashic record of where the soul actually is in its development, knows that what is being asked for and what the soul is genuinely ready to sustain are not yet the same. And so it waits. Not to withhold, but to prepare. Consider the seed. Planted in good soil, watered consistently, given adequate light, from the outside for a significant period of time, nothing appears to be happening. The surface of the soil remains unchanged. There is no visible evidence that anything is occurring beneath it. And yet, everything is occurring beneath it. The seed is doing the most essential work of its entire existence in that invisible period before it breaks the surface. It is developing the root system that will determine how high it can eventually grow, how much weight it can bear, how deeply it can draw from the earth when seasons of drought inevitably arrive. A seed forced to break the surface before that root system is established will sprout quickly and collapse just as quickly, because the visible growth arrived before the invisible foundation was ready to support it. The Akashic field records the soul's development with this same understanding. The prayers you have been sending into the universe, the desires you have been holding, the goals you have been working toward with everything you have, these are not being ignored, they are being prepared for.
The field is orchestrating the conditions, the encounters, the internal shifts, and the external alignments that will allow what you are calling forward to arrive in a form you can actually receive, sustain, and build upon, rather than a form that arrives too soon and shatters under the weight of your unpreparedness. There is a deeper layer to divine timing that the Akashic tradition addresses with particular clarity. The timing of your life is not only about your own readiness, it is also about the readiness of every other soul whose journey intersects with yours. Because your life does not exist in isolation in the Akashic field. It exists in a vast web of interconnected soul journeys, each moving at its own pace of evolution, each honoring its own soul contracts, each working through its own layers of karmic resolution. And the timing of when those journeys intersect with yours is not random. It is coordinated at a level of intelligence that the human mind, operating from its limited vantage point in linear time, cannot fully perceive. The person who is meant to appear in your life as a partner, a collaborator, a teacher, or a catalyst may not yet be ready to play that role. They may still be in the invisible period of their own root development, still working through the internal preparation that will allow them to show up for you in the way your soul actually needs, rather than a diminished version of that showing up that your impatience might settle for if given the chance. And the universe, reading the Akashic record of where the soul actually is in its development, knows that what is being asked for and what the soul is genuinely ready to sustain are not yet the same. And so it waits, not to withhold, but to prepare. Consider the seed. Planted in good soil, watered consistently, given adequate light, from the outside for a significant period of time, nothing appears to be happening. The surface of the soil remains unchanged. There is no visible evidence that anything is occurring beneath it. And yet, everything is occurring beneath it. The seed is doing the most essential work of its entire existence in that invisible period before it breaks the surface. It is developing the root system that will determine how high it can eventually grow, how much weight it can bear, how deeply it can draw from the earth when seasons of drought inevitably arrive. A seed forced to break the surface before that root system is established will sprout quickly and collapse just as quickly, because the visible growth arrived before the invisible foundation was ready to support it. The Akashic field records the soul's development with this same understanding. The prayers you have been sending into the universe, the desires you have been holding, the goals you have been working toward with everything you have, these are not being ignored, they are being prepared for. The field is orchestrating the conditions, the encounters, the internal shifts, and the external alignments that will allow what you are calling forward to arrive in a form you can actually receive, sustain, and build upon, rather than a form that arrives too soon and shatters under the weight of your unpreparedness. There is a deeper layer to divine timing that the Akashic tradition addresses with particular clarity. The timing of your life is not only about your own readiness, it is also about the readiness of every other soul whose journey intersects with yours. Because your life does not exist in isolation in the Akashic field. It exists in a vast web of interconnected soul journeys, each moving at its own pace of evolution, each honoring its own soul contracts, each working through its own layers of karmic resolution. And the timing of when those journeys intersect with yours is not random. It is coordinated at a level of intelligence that the human mind, operating from its limited vantage point in linear time, cannot fully perceive. The person who is meant to appear in your life as a partner, a collaborator, a teacher, or a catalyst may not yet be ready to play that role. They may still be in the invisible period of their own root development, still working through the internal preparation that will allow them to show up for you in the way your soul actually needs, rather than a diminished version of that showing up that your impatience might settle for if given the chance. And the universe, reading the Akashic record of where the soul actually is in its development, knows that what is being asked for and what the soul is genuinely ready to sustain are not yet the same. And so it waits, not to withhold, but to prepare. Consider the seed. planted in good soil, watered consistently, given adequate light, from the outside for a significant period of time, nothing appears to be happening. The surface of the soil remains unchanged. There is no visible evidence that anything is occurring beneath it. And yet, everything is occurring beneath it. The seed is doing the most essential work of its entire existence in that invisible period before it breaks the surface. It is developing the root system that will determine how high it can eventually grow, how much weight it can bear, how deeply it can draw from the earth when seasons of drought inevitably arrive. A seed forced to break the surface before that root system is established will sprout quickly and collapse just as quickly, because the visible growth arrived before the invisible foundation was ready to support it. The Akashic field records the soul's development with this same understanding. The prayers you have been sending into the universe, the desires you have been holding, the goals you have been working toward with everything you have, these are not being ignored, they are being prepared for. The field is orchestrating the conditions, the encounters, the internal shifts, and the external alignments that will allow what you are calling forward to arrive in a form you can actually receive, sustain, and build upon, rather than a form that arrives too soon and shatters under the weight of your unpreparedness. There is a deeper layer to divine timing that the Akashic tradition addresses with particular clarity. The timing of your life is not only about your own readiness, it is also about the readiness of every other soul whose journey intersects with yours. Because your life does not exist in isolation in the Akashic field. It exists in a vast web of interconnected soul journeys, each moving at its own pace of evolution, each honoring its own soul contracts, each working through its own layers of karmic resolution. And the timing of when those journeys
There is a tension at the heart of every serious spiritual inquiry, a question that arises inevitably once you begin to understand the laws of karma, soul contracts, and divine timing. And it is a question that deserves a direct and honest answer rather than the vague reassurances that spiritual teachings so often offer in its place. If the Akashic field records everything, if soul contracts are made before birth, if karma carries forward across lifetimes, shaping the experiences that find you, if divine timing orchestrates the arrivals and departures of your most significant encounters, then what room is left for you? What is the actual power of a single human choice made in a single ordinary moment of a single lifetime? Is free will real? Or is it the most elaborate illusion the human mind has ever constructed to make itself feel significant inside a universe that has already decided everything? The Akashic tradition does not sidestep this question, it answers it, and the answer is more nuanced, more empowering, and more demanding than either extreme position would suggest. Free will is real, completely, fundamentally, and consequentially real. But it does not operate the way most people imagine it does. It does not operate as the absence of all constraint. It does not mean that you arrived here as a blank slate with infinite options spread equally before you, uninfluenced by anything that came before. That is not free will. That is a fantasy of freedom that ignores the actual architecture of existence. True free will, as the Akashic tradition has always understood it, operates within a framework, and understanding that framework is what transforms free will from a philosophical concept into a genuinely useful force in your daily life. Think of it this way. A musician who sits down at a piano does not have infinite freedom. The piano has 88 keys. It operates within the laws of harmony and dissonance. The musician's hands have a particular training, a particular strength, a particular set of limitations built from the hours of practice they have or have not invested. None of this is a violation of the musician's freedom. It is the context within which their freedom operates. And within that context, the range of what they can create is still essentially limitless.
Two musicians sitting at identical pianos with identical training will never produce identical music because something irreducibly individual, something that belongs only to them, enters the moment of creation and shapes it in ways that no external factor fully determines. Your soul operates identically. The Akashic field, your karmic history, your soul contracts, the vibrational signature you carry from lifetimes of accumulated experience, these are the 88 keys of your piano. They are the context within which your freedom operates. They shape the terrain of your life. They determine which lessons are present and available in this particular chapter of your journey. But they do not determine how you respond to those lessons. They do not determine whether you turn toward growth or away from it, whether you meet the karmic curriculum with courage or with avoidance, whether you honor the soul contract or resist it, whether you trust the divine timing or exhaust yourself fighting it. Those responses belong entirely and irreducibly to you. This is the precise intersection where free will lives in the Akashic framework, not in the choosing of what experiences arrive, but in the choosing of how you meet them, not in the authoring of the curriculum, but in the quality of attention, honesty, and willingness you bring to it. And this intersection, seemingly small when described in the abstract, is in practice the most consequential territory in the entire landscape of a human life. Because how you meet your experiences is what determines what they produce in you, and what they produce in you is what changes your vibrational signature in the Akashic field, and what changes your vibrational signature is what changes what the field mirrors back to you in the next chapter of your journey. Free will, in the Akashic understanding, is therefore not a single dramatic act of choosing your destiny from a menu of unlimited options. It is the accumulation of thousands of small, seemingly ordinary choices made in the ordinary moments of an ordinary day. The choice to respond rather than react, the choice to tell the truth when a comfortable lie would have been easier, the choice to stay present with an uncomfortable emotion rather than reaching immediately for the nearest distraction, the choice to extend understanding rather than judgment, to remain open rather than contracting, to ask what this is teaching me rather than demanding that it stop. Each of these choices, however small they appear in the moment, sends a ripple into the Akashic field. Each one either reinforces the existing vibrational pattern or begins to shift it. And because the field responds to cumulative vibration rather than to single isolated events, the power of consistent small choices over time is genuinely extraordinary. It is the mechanism by which the soul actually evolves, not through one cataclysmic moment of transformation, though those moments occur as well, but through the steady, patient, daily exercise of choosing 1 degree higher than the fear, the wound, or the unconscious pattern would have chosen on its own. The Akashic tradition also addresses what happens when free will is not exercised, when the soul moves through its experiences on automatic pilot, responding from habit, from wound, from the unconscious patterns laid down by karmic history without ever pausing to choose differently. This is not a moral failure. The tradition does not condemn it, but it does identify its consequence clearly. When free will is not exercised, the karmic loop continues. The soul contract remains unresolved. The lesson returns in a new form, with a new cast of characters and a slightly higher intensity of experience, because the field is always attempting to bring the lesson into clear enough focus that the soul finally chooses to engage it consciously. This is why difficulty often escalates before it resolves, not because the universe is punishing you with increasing severity, but because the soul keeps encountering the essential curriculum, while the free will that could transform that curriculum remains unexercised. The field, in its perfect intelligence and its total commitment to the soul's evolution, simply increases the volume of the lesson until the lesson becomes impossible to continue ignoring. There is a concept in the Akashic tradition that speaks directly to this dynamic. It is sometimes called the point of choice. the moment within a recurring pattern when the soul reaches the precise fork in the road where genuine transformation becomes available. These moments do not feel significant when they are happening. They do not announce themselves with dramatic music or obvious cosmic significance. They arrive disguised as ordinary moments. An impulse to speak honestly when silence would have been safer. A pull toward forgiveness when resentment would have felt more justified. A quiet inner knowing that this time something needs to be different, even when every familiar habit is pulling toward the same old response. The soul that has developed enough awareness to recognize these moments and enough courage to choose differently in them is exercising free will in its highest and most consequential form. And the Akashic field records that choice with the same perfect fidelity with which it records everything else, adding it to the vibrational signature of the soul, shifting the frequency of the broadcast, and beginning to change what the mirror of the universe reflects back. This is why genuine spiritual development always produces changes in external circumstances that appear inexplicable from the outside. People who knew you before cannot fully account for why your relationships have changed, why different opportunities are finding you, why the patterns that defined you for years have simply stopped recurring. From the outside, nothing appears to have been done differently in any obvious way. But from the inside, from the level of the Akashic field, everything has changed because the soul changed, the vibrational signature shifted, and the universe, which has never been responding to your circumstances, but always and only to your frequency, began to reflect something new. Free will is not the power to escape the curriculum your soul came here to master. It is something far more profound than that. It is the power to meet that curriculum with such clarity, such honesty, and such genuine willingness to grow that the curriculum itself is transformed, that the lesson moves from an experience the soul endures into a wisdom the soul embodies, that the soul contract moves from an unresolved agreement into a completed and honored exchange between two souls who gave each other exactly what they came together to provide. You are not a passenger in your own Akashic record. You are its author, working within a framework of cosmic law that your own soul helped design, in conditions that were chosen with wisdom rather than imposed with indifference, toward an evolution that the field has been supporting with perfect consistency since the very first moment your soul drew breath in any lifetime it has ever lived. The laws are not your limitation, they are your curriculum. And what you choose to do with that curriculum in this moment and in every ordinary moment that follows is the most real and consequential freedom you will ever possess.
Everything we have explored across this journey has been building toward a single practical question, the question that separates wisdom that transforms a life from wisdom that merely decorates it. Not what are these laws, but how do you actually live them? How does understanding vibration, karma, soul contracts, divine timing, and free will change the way you wake up in the morning, move through your relationships, respond to your setbacks, and build toward the life your soul came here to live? Because knowledge that remains only in the mind, however beautiful, however precise, however ancient and carefully preserved, has not yet fulfilled its purpose. The Akashic tradition was never designed to be admired from a distance. It was designed to be embodied, to become the living operating system through which a soul navigates its human experience with increasing clarity, increasing alignment, and increasing freedom. The first and most fundamental shift that the Akashic laws ask of you is a shift in the question you bring to your own experience. Most people move through difficulty asking, "Why is this happening to me?" It is an understandable question. It is a human question. But it is a question that positions you as a passive recipient of a universe that is doing things to you, rather than a soul participating in a field that is responding to you. The Akashic tradition asks you to replace that question with one that is more honest and more useful. What is this experience reflecting back to me about the frequency I am currently broadcasting? What is this moment showing me about where I am in my own evolution? What is this situation asking me to see, to feel, to understand, or to finally release? This is not a question that bypasses the pain of difficult experience. It does not ask you to perform gratitude you do not genuinely feel, or to pretend that loss is not loss, or that betrayal is not betrayal. It asks something more demanding and more dignified than that. It asks you to hold your experience with enough awareness to extract the intelligence embedded within it, to treat the curriculum of your life with the same respect you would give to a teacher whose methods were sometimes harsh, but whose commitment to your growth was absolute and unwavering. The second shift the Akashic laws invite is a fundamental change in how you relate to patterns. When you notice a pattern recurring in your life, the same kind of relationship dynamic, the same financial ceiling, the same emotional response activated by different triggers across different circumstances, the conditioned response is frustration, shame, the exhausting sense that you are broken in some way that resists all attempts at repair. The Akashic understanding replaces that response with something entirely different: curiosity. Because a recurring pattern is not evidence of your failure. It is evidence that the Akashic field is holding open a specific doorway of growth until you are willing and ready to walk through it. The pattern is not your enemy. It is your most persistent and most patient teacher. And the moment you stop fighting it long enough to genuinely ask what it is teaching you, the doorway it has been holding open begins to feel less like a trap and more like an invitation. The third shift is perhaps the most practically powerful of all. It is the cultivation of what the Akashic tradition calls vibrational intentionality, the conscious and deliberate practice of choosing your inner state rather than simply inheriting it from your circumstances. This does not mean emotional suppression. It does not mean forcing positivity over genuine feeling. It means developing enough awareness of your own frequency that you begin to notice when you have dropped into a vibrational state that is not serving your evolution, and developing enough skill to consciously shift that state through whatever practice most effectively reconnects you to a higher frequency. For some people, that practice is meditation. For others, it is movement, or music, or time in nature, or prayer, or creative expression. The specific practice matters far less than the consistency with which it is applied, because the Akashic field does not respond to occasional bursts of high vibration followed by long periods of unconscious broadcasting. It responds to the sustained, cumulative frequency of a soul that has committed to the ongoing practice of conscious alignment. This is the work that the ancient traditions pointed toward when they spoke of spiritual discipline. Not the performance of virtue for an external audience, not the accumulation of spiritual experiences as credentials, but the quiet, daily, often unglamorous practice of returning again and again to your own highest frequency, of choosing in the ordinary moments of an ordinary day to respond from your wisdom rather than your wound, to act from your awareness rather than your conditioning, to move through your life as a conscious participant in the Akashic field, rather than an unconscious passenger being carried by currents you have never paused to examine. The Akashic records also hold what the tradition describes as the soul's original blueprint, the vibrational template of who you are at your most essential and most evolved, before the wounds of this lifetime layered over it, before the karmic patterns of previous lifetimes shaped around it, before the conditioning of family, culture, and experience taught you to present a version of yourself that was safer, smaller, or more acceptable than the full truth of what your soul actually is. This blueprint has never been damaged, it has never been lost. It exists in the Akashic field with the same perfect fidelity with which the field records everything, waiting not to be created from scratch, but to be uncovered beneath every layer of fear, habit, and accumulated misalignment that has settled over it across the long journey of the soul's evolution. This is what the deepest spiritual traditions across all cultures have been pointing toward when they speak of enlightenment, of liberation, of awakening. Not the achievement of some exotic altered state available only to the rare and extraordinary few, but the gradual, patient, sometimes exhilarating and sometimes brutally humbling process of removing what is not you until what has always been you becomes undeniably clear. The Akashic field holds that original clarity. The laws we have explored throughout this journey are the mechanisms by which the soul navigates its way back to it. There is a teaching embedded in every serious Akashic tradition that speaks directly to the question of what becomes possible when a soul begins to live in genuine alignment with these laws. And it is a teaching that deserves to be stated plainly rather than wrapped in abstraction. When you begin to consciously work with your vibrational frequency, when you begin to meet your karmic curriculum with awareness rather than avoidance, when you begin to honor your soul contracts with understanding rather than resentment, when you begin to trust divine timing with genuine surrender rather than performed acceptance, when you begin to exercise your free will in the small moments rather than waiting for the dramatic ones, something begins to change in your life that cannot be fully explained by any framework that does not account for the intelligence of the Akashic field. Synchronicities increase. The right people begin to appear at the right moments with a frequency that strains the limits of what coincidence can credibly account for. Doors open that logic could not have predicted. Patterns that defined you for years begin to dissolve without the agonizing effort that previous attempts at change required. And perhaps most significantly, a quality of inner coherence begins to develop. A sense of moving with the current of your life rather than against it, of inhabiting your own existence rather than performing it, of being for the first time, or perhaps for the first time in a very long time, genuinely at home in the life your soul came here to live. This is not a promise of a life without difficulty. The Akashic tradition makes no such promise. The curriculum does not disappear when you begin to engage it consciously. If anything, it intensifies in certain respects, because the soul that is genuinely committed to its evolution tends to call forward more demanding lessons, not fewer. But the relationship to difficulty changes entirely. What once felt like senseless suffering begins to feel like purposeful growth. What once felt like the universe working against you begins to feel like the universe working with extraordinary precision towards something your limited perspective cannot yet fully see. The Akashic laws also hold what the tradition describes as the soul's original blueprint, the vibrational template of who you are at your most essential and most evolved, before the wounds of this lifetime layered over it, before the karmic patterns of previous lifetimes shaped around it, before the conditioning of family, culture, and experience taught you to present a version of yourself that was safer, smaller, or more acceptable than the full truth of what your soul actually is. This blueprint has never been damaged, it has never been lost. It exists in the Akashic field with the same perfect fidelity with which the field records everything, waiting not to be created from scratch, but to be uncovered beneath every layer of fear, habit, and accumulated misalignment that has settled over it across the long journey of the soul's evolution. This is what the deepest spiritual traditions across all cultures have been